I met Andrew March 1999. I was in the 7th grade. He was in 8th. We barely, if ever, spoke, but I remember thinking he was hot. Pam called me one day not too long after we met and asked if I was interested in being his girlfriend. I said yes. She called him back to relay the news, and minutes later he called me for our first conversation. Our first conversation as boyfriend and girlfriend, and maybe our first conversation ever. It felt like we instantly hit it off. Here was a super hot guy who was interested in me. That feeling of elation. I was in my den still wearing my basketball jersey from that evening's game. As Andrew spoke, I remember thinking how I was going to be going out with an 8th grader, an older guy. We shared a love of the same music. MXPX was always Andrew's band. On our first date, we went to the mall with Pam and sat at Burger King for hours. I remember laughing uncontrollably. I'll never forget his slight lisp. Andrew was my first real relationship, my first relationship where I actually hung out with the other person outside of school. His friends gave him shit for dating a 7th grader. They weren't my biggest fans. There was a Lorenna haters club. I remember abandoning my own group of friends because they were popular. Andrew wasn't popular. He was punk rock by 8th grade standards. I remember our first kiss outside the Knights of Columbus after an Atari show. I was wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Andrew would be my first of many firsts. My first real kiss and the first boy I let touch my boob. We used to make out in his parents' basement and on the side of the road near Jimmy's Pizza. We were 13. Out of all of Andrew's friends who didn't like me, Sarah was the first to let me in. I remember going to Larkfield Lanes in Elwood. That's where Sarah and I really hit it off. We both thought the other was hilarious. Sarah became the bridge between the rest of the Lorenna haters and me. It was April 1999 and I had never smoked pot before, but Andrew had been talking about 420 for a few weeks and assured me that pot wasn't a big deal. That night at Larkfield Lanes, we smoked pot behind a bush near the bowling alley, out of a makeshift bowl Andrew had crafted out of a big pen. Through the dank weed and plastic fumes, I remember being high and feeling cooler than my 7th grade ex-friends. 420 was during spring break that year, and we all hit the town to get high. I remember we were all stoned and laughing at the absurdity of Andrew saying he felt like a dinosaur stepping on all the baby dinosaurs. The first time Andrew told me he loved me, he had run all the way from his house to mine, which was roughly 3 miles past the middle school, but felt like 10. Andrew was always committed and extreme. I was 13 and in love big time. Summer 1999 approached, and the memories of what occurred that summer are lost somewhere amongst the heat of the time. When school started up again that fall, Andrew was now in high school, and I was left with the same people I had abandoned the year prior. Andrew and I made it through a few months of figuring out how to be together with the new pressures of high school and growing up. Y2K was about to hit, and Andrew and I were making some millennium memories. There was a New Year's party at Liz Berger's house. I was the DJ. Andrew was offered a screwdriver. He asked my permission to have some. I had never had a drink at that point and was pretty opposed to it. Andrew persisted and ended up drinking the concoction out of a water bottle. It seemed like a lot, but maybe wasn't that much. Andrew and I broke up before I would finish the 8th grade, practically a year after we started dating. It was a rough end. I'd never felt heartbreak like that before. It felt like everything crumbling around me, even though I think I was the cause of it because I thought I had a shot with Stefan. Stefan never had an interest in me. Andrew ended up dating an 11th grader named Cara Dolph, but not before he would make out with someone I thought was my friend. When I got to high school, Andrew and I would talk sometimes, but for the most part we went our separate ways as people do. I dated around and became best friends with the members of the defunct Lorenna Haters Club. Relationships came and went, and Andrew became known as someone I dated in middle school, but I always knew he was so much more than that. December 17, 2012, Sarah called me. Andrew was gone.